Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Climbing Sycamores podcast, where we look at today's topics to get a better view of Christianity. I'm Annie Beege, and I'm joined by my friends Ben Sadler and Matt Harbach. Howdy.
Hello, everyone.
It's fall, y'all.
I got on a bike ride this morning, and it was amazing.
It's a nice day today.
Yeah, it was beautiful.
Sunny,
it was beautiful.
Decent weather. Good. Unfortunately, in other parts of the world right now.
Yes, my heart has been breaking.
Mm-hmm.
I usually try to avoid the news as much as possible, but the invasion of Israel by Hamas and then attacking hundreds of innocent people at this concert and then going into communities, and I mean, unfortunately, you just have to say it, raping and killing of children and women, it was really devastating. And then the confusion that's now ensued where there's people who are supporting this, pro-Hamas groups and things like that. And I think it's, we look back on the Holocaust and we think, how could this have ever happened?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's because initially, some of it was German pastors in Germany didn't stand up and say, this is unequivocally evil. Like there's no, when you want to get rid of a group of people just because
and is that what the motivation is? You don't think it's land?
I think, I don't understand all the details, but from the little that I've studied over the years on Hamas and it is designated as a terrorist organization. They're not after a land; they're after a group of people,
culture, people,
and they're after basically exterminating the Jewish population.
Boy, and you know what's worse about this too? I think because we've seen, there's been a lot of video of families saying like, "I saw a video of my loved one, my best friend, my whatever, being captured," like a video.
Right.
Like that's crazy.
Yeah, they have no, and the feeling of helplessness. And then also, I think something I have to be careful with, there's so much video that any of us can watch right now and how much we get sucked into really horrible things. And that's exactly what the terrorist organizations want, is they want to create terror. They want you to be afraid all the time. So it's very sad. Been praying about that a lot. I think the spiritual application of the things that we talk about here is being able to have categories of good and evil, right and wrong, and that we can say something is evil because you're hurting a human life, and humans are made in God's image. And how often the Bible really addresses this and talks about this is over and over again and clarifies those things. Now, you were talking before, you were saying, how you would define evil would be somebody with a hard heart.
Well, yeah, here's how I got to that. And so I think it was 2 days ago, there was a headline that 2 Hamas political officials had been killed in an Israeli airstrike. And I was like, yes!
Right.
But then I thought to myself, am I out of order as a Christian for thinking that way? And then I decided no, whether that's right or not, forgive me, because I think this is like just universally evil. And I think this is something where like the heart is hard. There is no reconciliation. There's no repentance. There's no, and so in my head, these are the kinds of people. If you can't work with them, they got to go. And you're causing all this terror. Like you got to go.
Right.
And so I didn't necessarily. So after I did check myself, but then I concluded that no, I don't feel bad about saying yes that they had been omitted from the equation. So, and that led me thinking like, okay, so what is evil? And I think that's what it is. It's a hardening of heart that you got to go.
Right, and that's why there's no. You don't negotiate with terrorists.
Right.
Because they're not willing to listen. They're not willing to change. They're not willing to be responsible for their actions. It's all about hatred. It's a hardening of heart. Like you said, it's a sociopathic bloodthirst. that yeah, there is no remedy for that, and so you have to call on the governments to eliminate people who are doing that, and that's biblical. I was thinking of quite a few psalms that really do respond to that. Psalm 5 talks about that, says, listen to the words of my mouth, Lord, consider my lament. Hear my cry for help, my King and my God, for to you I pray. In the morning, Lord, you hear my voice. In the morning I lay my requests before you and wait expectantly. For you are not a God who is pleased with wickedness. With you, evil people are not welcome. The arrogant cannot stand in your presence. You hate all those who do wrong. You destroy those who tell lies. The bloodthirsty and the deceitful, you, Lord, detest. But I, by your great love, can come into your house. In reverence, I bow down toward your holy temple. Lead me, Lord, in your righteousness because of my enemies. Make your way straight before me. Not a word from their mouth can be trusted. Their hearts are filled with malice. Their throats are an open grave. With their tongue they tell lies. Declare them guilty, O God. Let their intrigues be their downfall. Banish them for their sins, for they have rebelled against you. But let all who take refuge in you be glad. Let them sing for joy. Spread your protection over them, that those who love your name may rejoice in you. Surely you bless the righteous. You surround them with your favor as with a shield. And so that's just, and it's a psalm of David. So David also wrote psalms of asking for forgiveness, because going back to that hard heart. But if you are hard in your heart, you are continually giving yourself over to evil and to hurting people, then we pray for their God to bring them to justice. Yeah.
Right.
It almost sounds like maybe part of being righteous is hating evil.
Correct.
Ooh.
Which is not something we always say.
Right.
Well, because we have to be careful, right? Because of evil and that word and how we as Christians use it, and how, I think it could, we could say, you lied to me, you're evil, or so we kind of we use the word evil, and it spans a giant field of like a range of what what evil actually is.
Right. But I think what you're praying in here is stop the evil in myself, in me. Stop, to hate evil means I hate the evil in me. I hate the evil in them, and stop them from doing that. Stop me from doing it, stop them from doing it. And in some of these situations, the only way you're going to get somebody to stop pouring out murderous threats is that they die, because they are not stopping. There's no pulling back. There's no any kind of, it's just complete lies. And so that's what he's saying here is he's saying, Lord, you hate this, you do something, God. You hear my cry. You come to, bring them to justice. However God will do that, is he going to use a government organization or some other means? But the psalmist is praying that God would come to their relief. And so I think that's a big thing too, is that you don't take revenge in your own hands. You do what you can to protect yourself. You use the government, Israel has every right to protect themselves and to respond to the murdering of innocent people. But we do call upon God and God's representatives to do justice, and we ask God to stop evil in our own hearts and in the hearts of others, because it's not good for anybody. Yeah. So I think when you bring out personal revenge, that's when it can get. I think outside of the bounds of Scripture is when me, just a civilian, starts taking all that into my own hands, getting revenge. So it's very somber. I don't know all the political ramifications, but I think we need to continue to pray for our country, pray for the world, but with China, Russia, and then Iran, it does seem pretty questionable whether we have another big war on our horizon. So we keep all this before our God and ask for him to bring the wicked to justice and then to stop wickedness in our own hearts. I don't know. Anything else on that? What else do you guys think? How do you guys get your news on this? How do you understand what's going on?
I don't.
Okay, you stay away from all of it.
Well, I mean, I see bits and pieces here.
Okay.
But I stay out of the loop, basically.
Yeah.
Not on purpose. I'm just lazy.
Okay.
I watch the news every day just to have it on.
Okay.
Every morning.
Do you watch all brands, or do you have what do you usually?
I usually like the Today Show on Channel 4 is usually on for me all the time. And then I see things on TikTok as well.
Right.
I mean, how true is it? I don't know. I saw one today of a gal who grew up in, it's the Gaza Strip? Is that where? And she said she testified in this TikTok, again, whether or not it was true, I don't know, but she said that one of the things that they were required to say every morning was "Death to America." And I don't know where or like why, but it wouldn't surprise me, I guess, is my thing.
Gotta
Stand up.
Stand
Stand
up.
up. Ben just got a Charlie horse.
Ben just smacked his leg.
Got to eat more bananas.
Did 31 miles on the bike today?
Oh, it's the bike ride. Okay.
I never had it in my
Ouch.
hamstring before.
I thought you got stung by a bee there. You swatted yourself.
That's how it felt.
Yikes.
All right. Sorry about that.
That's
that was
all right.
weird.
Yeah.
It turned into a ball in my leg all of a sudden.
Ouch. So,
Anywho,
yeah, sucks. The situation sucks.
I've been just finding myself praying, doing a lot of praying for peace. I can't imagine. I'm thinking about as I'm preparing for this next message, we're doing this Peace of Mind series, and I'm preaching on Isaiah 26 coming up, not this Sunday, but the following week. And Isaiah is talking more in global terms of Judah being in the crosshairs of Assyria, these huge world powers that are looking to take over the world. And basically he's saying, we can have peace because you are a God of justice. And so when there's all this turmoil in the world, we believe that in the end it's going to be a righteous and a happy ending where God is going to figure this all out. And even now, I'm sure there's more stories than we know that you're not going to hear on the news of how God did miraculously protect some people or was merciful in ways that we can't always see. Unfortunately, some evil has just kind of spilled out, and so we continue to pray.
Yeah.
And you have another article that you were looking at that we're going to discuss. You want to bring that up a little bit?
Yeah, so I got this on MSN. It was something that popped up in one of their, features or whatever. The title is, "In When Religion Hurts You," that's a quote, "a psychotherapist argues religious trauma is trauma." So it's written by Religion News Service, and they interview this gal, Laura Anderson, who has a new book out called "When Religion Hurts You: Healing from Religious Trauma and the Impact of High Control Religion." And so, they kind of interview her and ask her a few questions. So why, I guess maybe we could start with why is there so little research on religious trauma? Why is this coming to the forefront all of a sudden? Is religious trauma?
Yeah, I think maybe we could start there. Now, she brings up in the opening few paragraphs, raised in evangelical church, she now describes as a dumpster fire of fundamentalist beliefs. Laura Anderson's terror of hell kept her up at night as a 4-year-old. Her insomnia was less about hell itself and more about the fear of being separated from her family if Jesus came back. So she'd lie awake, picturing the image of Jesus dying on the cross, hoping it would guarantee salvation. So she was, I think, the reality of hell is scary for anybody, and now it's hard because you only have one side of it, and you only hear a few paragraphs. On one hand, as I just got done reading that Psalm 5, God's judgment and even hell is a comfort to victims when there doesn't seem to be any justice. you know, what justice is there for, for victims of the Holocaust? Even more recently, Bill Cosby and all these kind of Me Too things that have come up. What real comfort is there unless there is a God who brings people to justice? So there's that. And so I think if we totally say all those Bible passages that talk about God's justice and even hell could be too traumatic for people, that we should wipe them out. Like, I think we have to be careful about what the implications are. Now, on the other hand, for hundreds of years, you could even say thousands of years, hell has been used as a control piece as well when people go beyond what the Bible talks about. 'Cause Jesus talked about hell too. That was kind of the thing that happened 500 years ago during the Reformation, where John Tetzel was really pouring the guilt and the hell and fire and brimstone to get people to buy indulgences to support the basilica. So for me, it's about motivation. And when you bring up really challenging, hard things like this, do you talk about hell more than Jesus did? Do you use it in a different way that Jesus did? How are you using it, and why are you talking about it? I think that's really important. So that I just wanted to bring that up because that was kind of the opening paragraphs. Now, is religious trauma? Yes. I think it can be some of the worst trauma because your faith is the core of who you are. There's nothing deeper in a person than what they believe about the biggest things of life. And that's why people aren't always comfortable with talking about faith, because it is so core. And then if you use that to manipulate or harm, for example, I've read cases where sexual perpetrators would have their victims pray beforehand and say, see, God didn't stop this. He didn't prevent this.
Oh, gross.
So he must be behind this. Or look at or putting the blame on the person. See, God wouldn't want us to do it, but the way you dressed or something, you made me do this or something like that. All that kind of stuff. That's the worst kind of trauma, I think, because you're twisting God's word. Or I've heard of, in domestic situations where you have the case I've gone through, an abusive husband who's twisted. You're not submitting. You're not being a good wife. And here's all the Bible passages. And because you want a divorce, you're the one you're sinning. Although he's done all the things that really allow for divorce and make it.
Well, I can think of another example quick too is I was talking to a bartender a few years ago. She's probably like in her mid-50s or so. And she was telling me a story how she was raised Catholic and her childhood best friend was raised Lutheran. And each of their respective religions and parents and families, whatever, told the two of them that the other one was going to hell because they didn't. And she told me, she said, I sat and my best friend and we cried together at a young age,
right.
12 years old, something, because each one thought the other one was going to hell.
Sure. Right.
That's traumatic.
Yeah, it is.
And she's 55 and she's telling me this. I'm a complete stranger.
Right. Still very vivid.
Very vivid, so.
Right. And for me, that would be in a case of insecure churches or leaders wanting to control their group and make sure they don't leave the flock, or that they realize that the boundaries are real clear. And sometimes people also do misunderstand. I'm just speaking as a preacher. I've had a lot of people misunderstand something you said, and they took it, oh, so you're saying my friend's going to hell. And, that wasn't necessarily the message. Just the concern about being a part of a church that doesn't preach grace, on how that could be detrimental to their faith. Sometimes people make conclusions, but yeah. So I think religious trauma is trauma, definitely. And, trauma is this idea that you had this, whether someone said something to you or did something to you in a moment, and then you have this ongoing wound that's not healing and can be brought up again, and then ongoing, either it's physical, emotional, spiritual consequences or problems that go on throughout your life. So I do think that word is one of those words that's being so used right now. It's been really heavily used last probably 5-10 years, that sometimes I think it belittles those who have PTSD, because not everything is traumatic, but there are things that are, Yeah.
How would you approach telling, like, if you have a kid and they're learning about all this stuff, like, how do you tell them about hell without, it's not a great place to be.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what do you say?
Do you use it in the ratio that Jesus used it? Right? Like, I mean, it's serious, but like, instead of making that like the focal point,
Right.
The ratio of, I mean, it should still be there because you can't really have one without the other, right? So
Right.
like you need the two, the law and gospel, but
Whenever we see Jesus talking with children, he's blessing them. He's saying, he's using them as an example of faith, saying, if you don't receive the kingdom like a little child, you will never enter it. And so I think that is the emphasis on looking at children as the example of faith. Tell them about who Jesus is. And there is a warning that I don't know. You talk at the appropriate level with your kids on all things, on sex, on money, on crime. If you're trying to explain to them what's going on right now in the Middle East, you'd speak in a way that doesn't bring out all the horrors, because you want to keep them from that stuff as long as possible. As people grow up, there is more of a danger of hardening your heart, which you were talking about before, and we do need to gradually talk, like we talk about all things, the realities of life.
what did you do in school? I wasn't raised in a Christian school. How did it, do you recall?
I don't know.
I mean, it wasn't hammered down your throat, right? Like maybe sin might have been, or did you make the connection or?
I do remember being afraid, but I remember early on, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, having a pastor who guest preached, and he was very clear, you're not going to hell. You are forgiven. God loves you. And that just took away so much of the fear that I remember having. So,
That's a good question.
Yeah, I don't know.
I remember it. It's like a fiery pit, and then somewhere along the line we decided that the devil has a trident and horns. I don't remember why we decided that, but that's Catholic probably. It's like medieval.
Yeah.
But it was like, whatever. That's the devil. He's got horns and a trident, and hell is a fiery pit, and that's where you go if you don't believe. And I kind of remember, like, I don't know. I mean, maybe I was a little bit scared of that, but I don't think I ever stayed awake, like, thinking about going to hell when I died.
The Old Testament really speaks in justice terms of God bringing people to justice. You don't hear a lot. Book of Daniel, a little bit. You don't hear much about hell until the New Testament, where Jesus really does kind of clarify that. But again, Jesus does not use it as really a tool to scare people or control people. So I think, for me, talking about justice is the way to talk. Yeah, emphasize that.
Well, and I like to, one of the points in this article, this interview, one of the questions, what do you mean when you say religious trauma is trauma? And she's saying that, she says, prior to the last 5, maybe 10 years, most dialogue around religious trauma in professional spaces suggested that to heal from it, you just needed to become an atheist. And for a myriad of reasons, I disagree with that. So she herself is not a Christian, or at least not but she also says that she doesn't discount religion. She doesn't discount the belief in God. She doesn't say that just here's the simple solution, that's just to become an atheist and ignore, I think you got to kind of work through something,
Right.
just instead of just denouncing, like you got to kind of work through it.
Yeah, because think about all that you are losing if you now all of a sudden say, I don't like how that was presented or the traumatic experience I had. Now I don't have any real fundamental basis for good and evil. I don't have any real hope that that I was created and that there is some sort of ultimate control in my life, that I have to control all things. There's so many things you have to give up that seem intuitive. They seem real in the realest sense. It's just kind of that one of those things, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you had a bad experience, don't throw away the community, the truth, the foundations. And Jesus was doing this all the time when, his biggest enemy or fiercest enemy were the religious leaders who, Jesus talks about how the Pharisees would control people with the fear of hell. And then he says, and after you convert them to your faith, you make them as much of a son of hell as you are. And so there's always been a temptation, because religion is so powerful and speaking from God is so powerful, to use it to control people. And fear is a powerful tool. We just have to be very careful with that.
Well, and she says too, now I always say I'm not anti-religion, but I am anti-harm and power and control and anti-abuse. So if you can find a religion or faith or spiritual practice that isn't including those things, I think that's wonderful. And so I think that just kind of goes with that, but I think we also have to be careful, because she would argue that, the purity culture is a form of, control, or, and, I don't know that I agree with her thoughts on that.
Yeah, I had a couple questions,
Yeah.
but let's go to more the direction you're going to.
Yeah.
Where she talks about high control religions.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, okay, here we go. In the back of the book, I talk about what I call the religious power and control wheel. There's a diagram, and you'll see categories like isolation, minimizing, denying, and blaming, spiritual abuse, economic control, defining gender and sexuality rigidly. So my first question is, how many of these things are we doing? And are we? I don't know if we're a high control religion. Are we like a medium control religion?
Well, I think if you're it's kind of like the culture that you said. If you're overarching, willing to speak out on abuse, willing to help people walk through their faith and their, whatever questions they might have, willing to address feelings of doubt, willing to, take hold accountability and whatnot, and not use hell as a tool and not manipulate your people, and the list goes on. If you have all those things, and I think, for me personally, at least I feel at Victory we do, we have, that culture. But then, when we talk about gender and sexual rigidly defining those things, you got 90%, I guess I could just look at like the percentage of like what's really good, and then like what's one thing that she might not. Does that make sense?
Well, I'm thinking, do we control people economically? No, we do ask for money. Do we shame and blame people? Not really, but we do convict people of their sins.
But we don't. I mean, we're not like.
Well, we should.
No.
The question is, when is this control and harming, and when is what made Jesus unique is he spoke the truth in love, and he let people go. If he said, he told the rich man, go and sell your possessions and give them to the poor, and then come follow me. And the man went away, and he let him go. He didn't try to control him. He said, do this, and you don't have to do this. So I think letting people know that there's consequences for your actions. That is not wrong to say that. Now, if it's done out of love, like I love you, and if you keep doing this, you keep making these decisions, this is what's going to happen to you. This is not good for you sexually. It's not good for you emotionally. It's not good for you spiritually to keep doing this. That's speaking the truth in love. And so I guess that's where it gets kind of muddy for me, is that anytime we make a truth claim, that's not controlling or harming. It might be hard to hear, but sometimes people, the book of the Proverbs says, wounds from a friend can be trusted. That I have people in my life, and Pastor Bill and you guys and other mentors and stuff that, there's been times where you're like, gotta stop doing that. And they'll call me on account, and that is hard to hear. I don't think that's traumatic. I don't think that's harmful.
High control, yeah.
Right. Because they want the best for me. And if you're a parent and you're not sometimes telling your kids, stop it.
Right.
When it becomes control, I think, is when it's built around your own ego and you're trying to force your kids to be a certain way so that you look good. I think that's when it gets to be harmful. But every faith is going to have non-negotiables. It's going to have values. Right. It's going to have commands. Is it just that you don't like those commands and so they're harmful or abusive, or are they really abusive? Are they actually hurting you? And sometimes they do. So you have to, yeah.
So that kind of goes into my next question that I was interested in your guys' response of. Let's see, where should I start?
So you're getting warm. It's warm in here, you guys. Toasty. It's really warm today. Woo!
We suffer on your behalf, listener, dear listener. So, what did you say?
Nothing. Go on.
You fiend. To say all religion is terrible and you just have to get rid of it, or the idea that God is dumb and only for mentally weak people, is incredibly shaming and discouraging. It's also not necessarily helpful for the healing process. And here's the sentence or the phrase. My job as a therapist is not to get you to a belief that I might hold. It is to help you heal and to lean more into who you are authentically.
That could be dangerous.
Yeah, what does that mean? And Ben, you're obviously a pastor, so you are like counseling with a lot of religious presuppositions. But I personally, I don't know if I agree with that statement, but you brought up the point like your beliefs are actually the deepest part of your identity.
Yeah.
So can you even be anyone authentically aside from your beliefs, whether or not it's a religion or if it's just, to me, it's always religion. To me, I would say everything's a religious belief because you have faith in it. But let's say it's not an organized set of beliefs, but it's just whatever beliefs you have.
Well, what she's talking about is, according to a counselor's code of ethics, you're not legal. You are. It is illegal to impose your value system on them. So you have to do something called informed consent to say. Now, you could say, I'm a Christian therapist, but I am not going to impose my beliefs on you. And I'm going to let you know that right away when we start doing therapy so that you recognize I'm not here to impose my beliefs on you. Now, that's really a tricky thing to do because you have core beliefs. Yeah. And so they talk about how you can bracket those beliefs. You're saying, all right, let's get you as healthy as you can be based on your core values as kind of client-centered, person-centered,
so weird,
person-centered therapy, but that you're not imposing it on them. I think it is challenging. It's a definitely different role than a pastor. A pastor is saying, I'm a pastor. If you're coming to me, here's the Bible. I'm going to tell you what the Bible says, hopefully after listening and understanding your situation. And hopefully when I use the Bible, it's not to try to keep you in this church or control you or manipulate you or, have some sort of power struggle over you, but to communicate what you believe is as true as you can understand it.
You'll be walking the line with both.
Right. And I think that's been interesting to talk about that as I'm learning about that. But I think if you establish that in the beginning, I'm a Christian counselor. If you're coming to me, this is who I am. I'm open to talking. I'm open to prayer. I'm open to talking about faith, but I'm not here to necessarily impose.
Convert you.
Now, I think that's good practice in general. We don't, as Christians, we don't necessarily have to impose our beliefs on anybody, but we can describe them. We can talk about them. And we don't necessarily have to say, and you have to believe this.
Yeah.
So that makes sense.
I just find it interesting, like where you might draw the line, because it's hard for me to imagine. Well, like you said, if you just take out all the religion and you just say I'm atheist now, you're not just replacing like God, heaven, and hell. You're replacing like your whole place in the universe.
Yeah.
You know, how you should organize, how you should prioritize your value and others' values.
Yeah.
Things like truth. I mean, if you go into that situation, you're like, hey, I'm not gonna impose my beliefs on you. Like, where do your beliefs even start?
Right.
Like, if it were me and I said, okay, like truth, like there is one truth, because there is one reality.
Yeah.
Nowadays, not everyone even believes that.
Right.
And is that because I'm a Christian? I think so.
Right.
But I mean, I don't know. I mean, quite frankly, I think the opposite is insane, but I can't wrap my head around it.
Yeah, I think that might be one of the reasons why it's so easy to be anxious. I'm not talking about clinical anxiety. I'm just talking about just in general. If all of a sudden you're denying any kind of institutional belief that we've had in our society for thousands of years, and you're denying all of that hook, line, and sinker and saying, I have to make up my own belief and it can't be anywhere close to that. Like that's a pretty big burden to put on yourself, to have to come up with your own code of ethics, your own belief system, your own view of reality, all those different things. So I think that's why she wisely says in this article, I don't think getting rid of religion is the answer. Now, yeah, so that's part of it is healing. When somebody has controlled you or tried to control you, you need to be healed from that. And I think that's the essence of it. Now, again, the therapist, this is why it's really important, ethically also, a therapist's job is to ask questions and to get a person to use the tools that they have to get healed. Once a therapist turns into advice giving and imposing, it seems like a quicker way to get things done. But all of a sudden now you're taking on the burden. And now if it doesn't work out, it's because of what you said. And so that's just not ethical. It's not good practice, and it doesn't usually work actually. So yeah, I do. Yeah, I think there's such a thing as religious trauma. I think we have to find ways to heal from it. And I appreciate, like what you said, Annie, that it's not saying it is necessarily religion's fault that we have. It's the devil's fault. I mean, the devil's been a liar since the beginning. The devil has been twisting the truth since the beginning. And that's really the source of all this wickedness. And so, it happened in Jesus' day. Jesus told the people, listen to the religious leaders because they sit in Moses' seat, but don't practice but don't follow them because they don't practice what they preach. It's like, so
that
even
makes things tricky, right?
Yeah.
It's conflicting.
So how do you know who to follow? So it does remind me that, all three of us, we work in the church, the high responsibility of representing our Savior well and accurately and not controlling, and representing him well. So anything else on this article?
I don't know. It's blazing hot in here.
Yeah, I'm ready. But I think at the end of the day, if people experience religious trauma, like it's okay to talk about it. It's okay to have, doubts and try to work through those things. And I think that's important. And I think, all Christianity should not be discounted if you're having questions or like if there's trauma there. The worst thing that a church can do is cover it up. Right.
If they have a bad leader who's controlling people, or there's other kinds of physical, emotional, sexual, any other kind of abuse that's going on, sometimes people say, well, we don't want to damage the reputation of Jesus or the church, so we're not going to tell anybody. But the cover-up is always worse. And Jesus doesn't need you to protect him. So speak the truth in love, report when you see something going wrong, and that's a way to be faithful to Jesus. and sometimes it is calling the institutions on the carpet, so that somebody can move forward and say, I can distinguish. There was people who stood up for me in the church against harmful leadership, and I can see that they were followers of Jesus, even if that other religious leader wasn't.
What were you going to say, Matt?
I was going to say, we might acknowledge that there are probably some people that have been traumatized by church that still go to church. I mean, there are probably people that come to our church
out of fear or what? Like what?
Well, maybe they were scared by probably Pastor Bill's preaching, but no. But I mean, maybe they have been traumatized by our preaching, but maybe they're traumatized by a previous church body or something, you know. But it's not just that people are traumatized and they completely leave. I mean, they could still be coming, and they could, because they have other pressures in their life, to still come.
Oh, maybe familial or okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's as much of that anymore, like societal pressure.
Yeah.
You don't have that as much, but I think it can still be there in a family. It's not coming necessarily from society anymore.
True.
So if people want to be here, but you're right. Yeah. I always preach with them in mind, hopefully. Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Okay. Anything else?
No.
All right. Signing off here.
Peace.
Later.
If you'd like to get a hold of us here at the Climbing Sycamores podcast, feel free to email bsadler@victoryofthelamb.com. bsadler@victoryofthelamb.com. If you like today's intro music, it's been brought to you by Andrew Lynch's song, My Name, Hello.